Good morning. Good morning, everyone. And it's good to see you all here. Good to see those back who have been gone for a while, and good to see some joining us who perhaps haven't been here before. So we'll be talking, just discussing a work of Zen Master Shitou. And we talked a little bit about him last week. He lived in the 8th century in China, reportedly lived a long life of 90 years, became ordained at the age of 13 and spent most of his years living, as the story goes, outside of a monastery in a small hut that was constructed on a boulder that was on the mountainside. And his name actually means stone. That was the name that he was given by those who followed him. So he spent much of his time in seclusion. There are a couple writings of his that are extant, and one of them that I find really compelling is it's called the Song of the Grass Hut, Hermitage, Song of the Grass Hut. So I guess I'd like to, it's 32 lines long. It's not terribly long. And we'll go through it a little bit at a time, because I think it can bear that kind of attention. And but I'd like to start by reading the whole thing so that you have a feel for where it's going. Song of the Grass Roof Hermitage. This translation, by the way, is by Dan Layton and Kaz Tanahashi. I've built a grass hut where there's nothing of value. After eating, I relax and enjoy a nap. When it was completed, fresh weeds appeared. Now it's been lived in, covered by weeds. The person in the hut lives here calmly, not stuck to inside, outside, or in between. Places worldly people live, he doesn't live. Realms worldly people love, he doesn't love. Though the hut is small, it includes the entire world. In 10 feet square, an old man illumines forms and their nature. A great vehicle, Bodhisattva, trusts without doubt. The middling or lowly can't help wondering, will this hut perish or not? Perishable or not, the original master is present. Not dwelling south or north, east or west. Firmly based on steadiness, it can't be surpassed. A shining window below the green pines, jade palaces or vermilion towers can't compare with it. Just sitting, with head covered, all things are at rest. Thus, this mountain monk doesn't understand at all. Living here, he no longer works to get free. Who would proudly arrange seats trying to entice guests? turn around the light to shine within, then just return. The vast, inconceivable source can't be faced or turned away from. Meet the ancestral teachers. Be familiar with their instruction. Bind grasses to build a hut, and don't give up. Let go of hundreds of years and relax completely. Open your hands and walk, innocent. Thousands of words, myriad interpretations, are only to free you from obstructions. If you want to know the undying person in the hut, don't separate from the skin bag here and now. So we'll kind of focus a bit on the first 8 lines, but first of all, I'd like to just say a few things about how one might approach this poem. Clearly we can't get inside the head of Shitou. Shitou lived in a vastly different life than we live. He had assumptions about the world that we don't have. We have assumptions that he didn't have. It's just totally different history, different language, different culture. So we can't really know for sure what Shitou was trying to tell us. I think what we can know for sure is that he was motivated to write this by some issue or question. There was something that he was trying to get across, and he was trying to write it to be of benefit to those who read it. As he says in the final lines, thousands of words, myriad interpretations are only to free you from obstructions. So he's trying to help us in a way. And how do we use this poem? How do we derive that benefit or that help? So I think that's perhaps a more relevant question than what was in Chitou's head. And thinking in terms of the motivation for writing this poem, I guess I return to the last 2 lines. If you want to know the undying person in the hut, don't separate from this skin bag here and now. If you want to know the undying person in the hut, there are a number of characters in this, and it's not entirely clear how they all relate to each other, and it's not clear what each one represents. And being verse, being a poem, we're allowed to give them different interpretations. They don't have to just represent one thing. But there's the grass hut, and then there's the person in the hut. And then he talks about the old man who illumines forms and their nature. He talks about this mountain monk. And then he talks about the undying person in the hut. So it would seem to me that this is an exploration of self and the relationship of self to everything else. As Dogen said many centuries later, to study the Buddha way is to study the self. So I think this is in part an exploration of what it means to exist as a human being. What is self? Which brings up the question of what is mind? Because as the Buddha said in the Dhammapada, mind is the forerunner of all action. All deeds are created by mind, led by mind. So how we perceive ourself, how we perceive our existence, our mind, has a lot to do with how we behave in the world. It has a lot to do with our way of living, our way of being in the world. And we're granted a fair amount of discretion in that regard about how we perceive the self. And it's not clear what way of looking at things is the right way. And I'm not sure the Buddha was really interested in the right way. The Buddha was interested in the skillful way, the way that yields benefit to self and others, the way that minimizes the suffering in the world for ourselves and all beings. So I'd like to just show a couple things here to illustrate, to make a couple points, if I can. So this is a Chinese characters of the grass hut poem. And it's you can see that it's a verse. It's and there are 32 lines, 16 sort of pairs of lines, and it's all arranged very artistically. This verse was composed with a high degree of intention. So one last thing I would like to share, however, is just these first 8 lines, which we'll kind of focus on. I've built a grass hut where there's nothing of value. After eating, I relax and enjoy a nap. When it was completed, fresh weeds appeared. Now it's been lived in, covered by weeds. The person in the hut lives here calmly, not stuck to inside, outside, or in between. Places worldly people live, he doesn't live. Realms worldly people love, he doesn't love. So I think one thing this brings up is what is the hut? Is he actually talking about his abode, where he lives? Is he talking about what meanings does this hut have, and what's his relationship to the hut, and who is the person inside the hut? And what are these weeds? He talks about the effort to rid one of obstructions. as part of his motivation, I think, for writing this. And what are the weeds? Are they the inexhaustible delusions? Are they difficulties that arise? And just after he finishes this, all the effort involved in building this hut, weeds start encroaching upon it. And after he's lived in it a while, it's completely covered by weeds. All the difficulties and perhaps obstructions that, or aversions that we encounter in life inevitably, covered by weeds. But he sort of faces those with equanimity, and when he's hungry, he eats, and then he relaxes and takes a nap. Because, as he says, the person in the hut, and who is this? The person in the hut is not stuck to inside or outside or in between, and is not interested in worldly things. What are worldly things? Worldly things, fame and gain, glory and gold, worldly things. So it's complicated. Is he identified with the person in the hut? Now, one thing that is relevant here, I think, is the view at that time among Chan writers that there was a true self, and then there was this sort of persona that we present to the world, the roles we play, the personality that we construct. But far beyond that, and far preceding that, is what is often referred to as the original face, the true self. Or big mind, as it might be called. And there's this interaction that's kind of inexplicable. Among these. And I think that's partly what Shitou is trying to get across to us, that there is, in fact, a true self that has no interest in worldly things. So we'll continue on with going through this poem a little bit at a time from week to week. But I'm interested in thoughts about what do you think the weeds are, and who is the person in the hut? Is he just literally talking about himself? But how does he perceive himself? What is he trying to move us toward with this verse? How do we use it? So I think I'll stop there, and we can break up into smaller groups for some discussion. and then rejoin in a few minutes and go over this some more or other things that people may bring up. Thank you so much for listening.